Fighter planes were an essential part of World War II. Aircraft and control of the air helped greatly in the end of the war. On the Western Front, the German Air Force, called the Luftwaffe, initially controlled the skies. The German Messerschmitt Bf-109s held air superiority during the Battle of France and the invasion of Poland. Another powerful German fighter used throughout the war was the Focke-Wulf FW-190. The campaigns in the Western Front generally comprised of bombing raids, so Allied fighter planes were generally used to escort and protect bombers rather than being used for attack missions. The British Royal Air Force were able to equal the Luftwaffe during the Battle of Britain thanks to the Hawker Hurricanes and the Supermarine Spitfires. The British also had an edge over Axis powers with their newly developed radar technologies, which helped aid their later nighttime bombing raids. However, the US Air Force conducted bombing raids during the day, and their unescorted B-24 and B-17 bombers were unable to fend off German interceptors like the 109s or 190s. So the later arrival of long-range fighters like the P-51 Mustangs helped to escort the bombers and establish control of the skies in Western Europe along with the other Allied fighters. When the Allies had control of Germany, the commander of the Luftwaffe, Reich Marshal Hermann Göring, said, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." On the Eastern Front, low-altitude combat was typical, as well as surprise raids by the Germans on grounded planes. The Soviets had outdated planes and were outnumbered, easily taken down in one-sided dogfights by the German 109s. However, the Soviets later designed the Yakovlev Yak-3 and the Lavochkin La-7, both of which were more equally rival to the 109s. And the Lend-Lease Act also provided Allied planes such as the Bell P-39 Airacobra, which proved effective in low-altitude combat. Though jet planes were being developed during the war, they were too late to enter any combat missions, and only Germany conducted any major tests. The Allies' campaign on the Pacific Theater began after the attack of Pearl Harbor. The Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service primarily used Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, and the Army Air Service primarily used Nakajima Ki-27 and Ki-43s. They had light armor but better range, maneuverability, speed, and climb rates compared to the American planes, and quickly gained air superiority in the Pacific. The Japanese also had really well-trained pilots, including many who had experienced fighting in China before Pearl Harbor. In contrast, the Allies in the Pacific were unorganized, undertrained, and poorly equipped, but the US soon developed more powerful Grumman F-4 F-3 Wildcats and Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, which had superior firepower, ruggedness, and dive speed, exceeding those of the Japanese Zeros. The US also trained pilots and developed new tactics, including the Thatch Weave, to take advantage of the strengths of the Wildcats and the P-40s.
The Thatch Weave is essentially section engaged maneuvering as we know it today, where you try and put that enemy aircraft or that bandit in a dilemma. So by flying abeam each other, they have a bandit at their 6 o'clock, they're going to turn into each other, across each other's tail, and force that bandit to pick one fighter or the other. And by doing that, by picking one fighter, that adversary, that bandit now becomes vulnerable to the other fighter.
These new tactics helped change the tide, letting the US Air Force gain air control over the Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal, and New Guinea. The US later developed even more models such as the Grumman F6F5 Hellcat, Lockheed P-38F Lightning, Navy Corsair, P-47 Thunderbolt, and the P-51 Mustang planes, all of which outperformed the now outdated Zeros. The US also had a squadron in China called the Flying Tigers. The Flying Tigers were the only American forces positioned in China and successfully held off the Japanese, destroying over 60% of one of their attack forces in one battle.
The Tigers weren't going to lose any planes on the ground. Kunming wasn't going to be another Pearl Harbor or Clark Field. Japs were about to feel the bite of these razor-teeth tiger sharks, the terrifying emblem of the Flying Tigers. And so, American pilots and American planes, aided by a primitive Chinese warning system, were about to tackle a formation of the Imperial Japanese Air Force.
Their squadron's shark-faced fighter planes remain among the most recognizable of any individual combat aircraft of World War II. 300 Japanese planes were destroyed and only 14 of their own pilots were lost. Late in the war, the Japanese produced new fighters such as the Nakajima Ki-84 and the Kawanishi N-1K to replace the Zero, but they manufactured too few of them, lacked trained pilots, and were running out of fuel. The Japanese mainly resorted to kamikaze tactics towards the end of the war. Fighter planes were a key factor in the success of the American military campaign in the Pacific, and without those brave pilots, the war could not have been won.
Some new information on a very cool story that unfolded live right here on Happening Now on Friday. A World War II fighter plane that's been sitting at the bottom of Lake Michigan for more than 65 years is now on the surface, as you can see. Right now, at this moment, it's in a hangar where locals can get a look at it before it moves on to its new home at the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola, Florida.